and welcome. I'm Carmen Isabella, and today I will be sharing with you how I came to study Buddhism and meditation in Thailand. Because 3 years ago, I first landed in the city of Chiang Mai in the afternoon, and not 24 hours later, I was on a bus towards the northern north of Thailand, past the city of Pai, to a Buddhist monastery I had read up on the internet. You can just walk in unannounced. And as I arrived there, I came to walk around the monastery grounds and explore. And I saw this little open pavilion where there were 2 monks sitting and a group of people who were asking them questions. So I just sat down in the back and I listened. And I thought, this is interesting. This sounds a lot like solution-oriented thinking, like self-development, self-improvement. This doesn't sound like I would think a religious doctrine sounds. So I was there in the back, just nodding along to what they were saying, inwardly agreeing, until there was this one statement that caught me off guard. And that was the statement, because all of our thoughts are not our own. And that just, for me at that time, didn't make any sense. So there was a blank in my mind for a moment. And then I asked out loud, like, excuse me, sorry. But if they're not my thoughts, then whose are they? And the elder of the 2 monks smiled. And he didn't answer me directly, but instead he asked me, have you ever seen baby sea turtles hatch? He said further that baby sea turtles are a representative for all beings. We can observe something in their behavior that is applicable for us all. So I was interested to hearing more and getting my question answered. And I listened as he started how baby sea turtles hatch 2 months after their mother has gone back into the ocean. And by the time they see the light of day, there's no one there to show them, and they have no previous experience, no knowledge. And yet, they all turn towards the ocean. They all push their way forward to make it into the water. And the question is, and that he asked me back then, was, how do they know? And I remember that in that moment, I felt as if I would have to come up with something smart. So I was struggling. I'm not sure if I answered or if I tried to say something around the lines of science. But then he suggested instinct. And I said, yes, I can go with that. Instinct sounds good. And ever since then, I've heard the story many times told by my teacher or by other students or by myself. Instinct is usually the answer. But that just pushes the question one step further back, because now we ask ourselves, what's instinct? In Thai, actually, yeah, he told me that back then already. It's called Sanchatayan, which is a compound word combining sanchat and yana. It means so much as pre-existing, something that has always existed before any individual sea turtle on any beach in the world, and inner knowledge, or also a program. So now this one here is important. Like, I use the word program because it is not something passive, knowledge that just lies around there, but this program actively guides, advises, teaches, and leads these turtles. It instructs them. So that is what instinct is. From there, I still yet didn't have my question answered, but I followed along patiently, seeing where this might take us. And that venerable monk, who is up to this day still my teacher, he said, well, when all of these turtles are instructed, are led, dictated by this program, then why aren't they behaving the same? So we saw that they strive towards getting into the water, but in the moment-to-moment decisions that are there between the influences of environment and predators and lights and all of this, there are still individual decisions that the sea turtles have to take, and that they are guided to take based by their instinct, because they have nothing else to rely on. They can only rely on their instinct. So these moment-to-moment decisions, you see them making different choices, and you wonder why. Like I said before, if they're all dictated by this same program. And this is where my teacher said we come to look at the core of Buddhism. All other teachings branch out from this discovery that the Buddha made. And so I realized at this point that he had been telling this story of the turtles going to the instinct to get to this point where he said, well, there are many ways of answering this question, why? But the answer that is really answering it completely, and that one can prove for oneself, is the answer that the Buddha gave 2,500 years ago. The Buddha taught that there is something that creates and dictates or controls everything and every being. And he called that nature. But he said that of this nature, there's not one, but three. When we realize there's something that is dictating the sea turtles, and we trace it back to instinct, we then ask ourselves, where does this instinct then come from? Who created that? And that is where we come to nature. What the Buddha taught controls and dictates every being. So he said nature creates this program or this instinct that then instructs all beings. There's not one nature, but three. This in and of itself is a big concept. And I'm taking some time here to really make sure that we don't just gloss over this. So this means that there are actually three forces that create, control, or dictate every being. These three forces, they are best introduced by their goals, because their goals make them who they are. We have the constructive nature, or the wholesome nature that strives for prosperity, happiness, and peace. And you could say it's the expert in that field. So it leads beings actively towards that outcome using instinct. Now, there's the destructive nature, the exact opposite, also called the unwholesome nature. This one, the goal of this nature is destruction, suffering. They're the expert in that. So they're smart and clever in ways how to guide beings, how to bring them towards that outcome. And then there's the third nature, which is called the neither constructive nor destructive nature. And what that means is that it neither strives for destruction nor for construction, but more to have everything stay the same, so stagnation. This nature is also an expert, and it's an expert in guiding beings to neither progress nor degrade. It is an expert in wasting time. Those are the three natures. And when we look back at the sea turtles, we see that every single action of a turtle is guided by one of those three natures. So the outcome of that action is the achievement of that nature. So when we look at the entire life of one turtle, then we see the achievements of the different natures, but in different proportions. Every being is controlled by the three natures, but not in the equal proportions, everyone in different proportions. So that was the sea turtle story that I was told by my teacher all that time back then. I still had in the back of my mind that we got here because I asked, well, if they're not my thoughts, then whose are they? And of course, by this point, I had an idea that the answer might involve something like instinct and nature, but it wasn't yet completely clear to me. So that is where my teacher went on to bring an example of a human. And he brought the example of a man who got a call at work from his neighbor that he should quickly come home because his door was slightly ajar and it looked fishy. So he rushed back home and he did find the door open, and inside was a mess, and his wife and child were crying when he came in. And they told him that it was his enemy who had come to threaten them and who had destroyed the furniture and everything. And in that moment, inside of the man, anger rose up really strong, together with a voice that said, "That's it. That's enough. I'm going to find him and I'm going to kill him." And not a moment later, on the other side, another voice appeared that said, "If you do that, you go and you find him and you kill him, you will be arrested by the authorities and you will have to go to jail for the rest of your life. What will your wife and child do then?" But the anger didn't stop provoking yet. It just lowered the level of intensity a little bit. All right, if you don't go and kill him, then at least get your buddies together and go and find him and give him a taste of his own medicine. Make sure he'll never come back. But then on the other side, the other voice again came up with clarity and regard for consequences. And it said, if you go find him and you beat him up and he doesn't die, he knows where you live. He knows your wife and child. You will never sleep peacefully again, knowing that he can always come back. And my teacher turned to me back then and he said, "Have you heard such voices in your mind before?" And I remember at this point that I was getting a bit distracted by the moral of the example. But of course, I had heard voices in my mind before, like, should I go? Should I not go? Should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I say that? Should I not say that? I've heard voices in my mind before. And he said, well, those voices, have you ever considered that these come up effortlessly without any intention for you to bring them up? And you can't just stop them either. So how can you say they are your own? You have not created them. And he was and he is, of course, right. And he said the only reason that not everyone knows this and is paying attention to this is because we're so familiar with it, because it has been happening ever since we can remember. So at this point, the realization was that also I am guided from within all the time by the thoughts and emotions that come up effortlessly by themselves. And you can see in the example of the man that they're extremely different in nature. Like in the example, one voice is trying to make the situation escalate further, and the other one, for that moment, is trying to prevent that from happening. And there's a really, really important point here on responsibility, because this means that for a thought and an emotion to come up inside of us, that one, we cannot do anything about it. It comes up literally by nature, or brought by one of the three natures in accordance to the teaching of the Buddha. So we don't manufacture it and we do not bring it to our doorstep. But there is responsibility that we have. And I want to get to that, but first I want to talk a little bit about the different voices inside of my own mind. The claim is that if we follow this reasoning, this voice has been behind all the mistakes we ever made in our life. And I have a couple of examples for that to make this more easy to understand. One of them is when we are in school and there's a subject, let's say math. For some kids, the voice will come up inside of their mind that says, I don't understand this, I can't do math, I'm not good at math. And when they believe this voice, it actually becomes reality, because when they sit there, this voice comes up, it says, I can't do math, I don't understand this. Then the feeling that comes with that thought as well, it's like a package, thought and feeling, makes them feel like squeezed on the inside, uncomfortable, and they start to dread to go to math classes. And when the teacher speaks or they see the exercise in front of them, they don't hear the teacher speaking, they don't see the exercise in front of them, but they only hear the voice inside of their mind that's louder, that says, I cannot do this, I don't know this, this is too hard. I noticed this in kids when I would do tutoring, and I would say like, hey, anyone can get discouraged, you know, but then go about it slowly again, to in the end do what? Make them no longer listen to that voice, but listen to me instead. That's one example. So listening to that voice, actually manifested that they were not able to do math, not because they were not clever, but they were guided and instructed in such a way that that was the outcome. Another example is actually with me and a different friend, and it again goes around the topic of understanding, where I had the voice in my head that said, oh, like, we kind of grew apart, we have chosen different paths, we don't understand each other anymore. And I had almost agreed with it until I realized, because I had already been practicing by that point. So before I realized, like, wait a moment, this is not my thought. And I realized this is not a neutral perception of reality, but that this is manipulation. Because once I accept it, then I believe that we no longer can understand each other, that we are no longer on the same wavelength. And then I stop trying to understand her. And when I realized and caught it in my own mind with the practice of mindfulness, which I will refer to later, I had the opportunity to not believe it. I had the opportunity to realize that this is not my thought. That it came up, I cannot do anything about it. But when I believe it, then I make it my own. The last and gravest of examples is when this voice becomes extremely loud and it starts to narrate everything, like makes the world seem a really dark, really hopeless place. And this is for people who then start to sink deeper into depression, which can unfold in different ways. But behind it again is this voice and the really heavy feelings of pressure. To finalize this little branch talking about the destructive nature and their voice, they always use thought and pressure, basically, like emotional pressure, because they don't have logic, they don't have reason on their side. They instead rely on pressure, on force. So that is the destructive nature. I hope you're still with me. And then we also have the constructive nature, the wholesome nature on the other side, which I also want to give you a couple of examples for so that you can follow better. For me, it doesn't always have to be a big realization. You can also notice it in the small things. So maybe, so it will be the voice who will, for example, tell me, like, look at your dad, maybe you're making yourself a cup of tea right now, why don't you make him one too? Or as you're sitting in the garden, why are you not taking out a chair for your grandma so that she feels welcome to sit there, because otherwise she might be worried that she's disturbing you. So like, invite her, communicate this to the other person. This small voice that invites you to like lend a hand, what people call they're empathetic. But again, also here, no responsibility for the thought coming up, right? And like the good intention coming up. But the result, the good outcome is ours to enjoy when we follow it, when we decide to follow it. That would be one example. Another example would be when we work on something and we just can't get to the answer, but we then go home, we take a walk, we take a shower, and then the right answer just pops up in our mind with all the details, the entire plan on how to execute it. Where again, all of our good ideas came from that voice or the wholesome nature, because we ourselves cannot just make a good idea. And that would be the last point, when we are blank, right? Like, have you ever been in a situation where you're an expert on this? Maybe you're having a presentation in front of the class and someone asks you a question and you should know the answer, but there's just complete nothing in your mind. You cannot just create anything on the spot. You literally have to wait for something to come up and help you. That's it. on the two different natures, the neither constructive nor wholesome nature. I'm going to not get into that too much. At this point, I think just know that this one is the one guiding to procrastination and wasting one's time. Basically, not changing. Let's do a little wrap up together. When we look at this, we zoom out of everything I was just talking about. I learned that Buddhism isn't something vague, something where a lot is open to question, philosophical questions, but actually it's very systematic. And it speaks of when you have these three sources, the three natures, you have three big systems. Behind the system are the three natures. They're the ones behind the system. The destructive one, in the Pali term called akusala dhamma, the constructive one, gusala dhamma, and the neither constructive nor destructive one, abhyagata dhamma. Who they are is defined by their goals, like I said. And each system exists for them to get towards their goal. What I mean by that is we see how their way about guiding beings is actually highly systematic. So they use thoughts and emotions to bring the being to do an action that is in accordance with the result that they want, or building up the result that they want to get to, ultimate destruction or ultimate prosperity. And I have an example for this. Imagine they're the directors in a theater, and each of these three directors wants their own play to be put on the stage, to be played out. It's like we're the actor, and they hand us a script together with the screenplay. So how to say it, with what kind of emotion, what our attitude and our belief is, all of that in one package. And we are the ones who then decide if we're going to play this role. And if we do, then of course the outcome of that scene will be in accordance to what we play, what we enact on the stage. So that could be there is the play that's a catastrophe, right? And then there's the one with a happy ending. And there's the one that just drones on forever and nothing ever happens. This is a metaphor, right? But there's a really real part about this, because when I started studying this, I realized that you get handed this script, do you want to play this role? And when you take it, the energy is being brought about to actually do it. So how do we get from thoughts and emotions to action? For anything to move forward, we need energy. So the example I like to use is when you sit on the couch after work and you're completely, nothing is gonna bring you up again. You're absolutely tired, heavy, everything. But then the thought comes up inside of your mind. Why don't you go to the fridge? There's a snack in there. When this thought comes up into your mind and it offers for you to, become the snackster in this situation, while it remains there, it brings about energy to actually do it, right? It keeps on trying to talk you into it. The longer it maintains inside of your mind, the more energy it accumulates to then push you over the edge, where it's enough to go against the heaviness and get you out of your chair to go and snack. Now, I don't want to get lost in the moral of this either. I just want to look at how everything really works absolutely systematic. So one more time, we have the one behind the system, which are the three natures. We have the mechanism. So they use the tools, thoughts, and emotions bring them up in the mind of beings to then use the function of the mind, which is that the mind is also an energy generator, to bring about energy, to push that action forward. To complete the overview, which then will lead to an outcome. Immediate, midterm, long-term outcome that is in accordance with the nature that was behind it in the first place. So with which system is running in the first place. So from the beginning to the end, unfolding, absolutely systematical. When anger comes up in our mind, for example, with all the reasoning why we should be angry, why we should take the role of the maybe angry partner in the relationship. And it says, it will have reasons, right? It will say things like, he did that on purpose, or she, da-da-da-da-da-da. All of that to maintain in your mind so that you keep listening, so that the energy is being brought about to then force out the words, like shout at the other person. And there will be a voice telling you what to say, like literally like in a theater, and someone is literally giving you the text, like, say this is what will really like strike them hard. Until there is no more thoughts, there's no more anger. Have you ever had that feeling where it's just like you stop the moment where the thought and the emotion are no longer there, are no longer strong? You're like, you know what, like, whatever, then it's over. There's no action anymore because the thought and emotion in the mind have stopped. So again, like we see that systematic connection. If there's no thought and emotion, the energy is not being brought about, the action is not happening, the outcome can no longer come about as well. We have made it to the final part of this video. So considering this, and when I heard this for the first time as well, and learned about that all of our thoughts are not our own, I was not reflected enough at that point to look at my own life. I was still busy at looking at other people and how I thought that was true. But of course, later on, I came to reflect and look at my life and look at different stages, different parts, how they came to be the way that they were, at least from my behavior, my role in it, basically. And to see those three natures in myself, and see parts of my life that unfolded with like one nature maybe being specifically strong in that time. And I remember back then that I had only just entered Thailand, no plans to do more than just visit a monastery and learn a bit about Buddhism. But my first journey in Thailand actually turned out to be traveling from monastery to monastery and learning more and more with this teacher and a couple of other students, because I thought, if this is true, if all of this say is true, then this might be the most important thing that I ever get to learn, because it talks about the very foundation of the life we live. So no matter what I decide to do going forward, I need to know more about this. And I was also thinking of like people close to me and family members that were really suffering from the destructive voice inside of their mind. And I was like, what if me learning about this would help them too? Or what if they could come too and learn this as well? And this is, for me to let you know why 3 years later, I'm still coming back to Thailand all the time. And I'm studying Buddhism and meditation full time. And of course, there are loads and loads more details, but we have time. I've just only opened this channel. So thank you so much for listening, really. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And this is something for you to consider and to look at your own mind and see and observe. I will do more on our responsibility. I will do more on, so with knowing this, what should we do now? And how meditation and mindfulness fits more into the context in later videos. So yeah, Thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye bye.